thank you very much. I just want to, big data and supply chain, I think we're at a cusp of some really exciting things that are changing in the industry. And I just want to make sure that we, as part of APICS and a part of supply chain intelligence, that we understand what these changes are, because I think something is about to happen. And if you are going to take away anything from this meeting, just know that supply chain and big data, they're in its infancy. So what I'm presenting today, some of it's just ideas, because it's not taken hold in most corporations, and it's just growing. Now, I was brought in, along with Prarthana, to establish a supply chain presence, but also to do advanced analytics and business intelligence. And it was partly to capture this, probably this growth of big data within the supply chain itself, because we know it's about to happen. There are new tools that are taking place that we've never seen before. Probably if anyone who's been in data warehousing or in business intelligence for the past probably 20 to 25 years, the evolution of big data analytics has changed in the last 2 to 3 years. It's been a significant growth. It's been faster than ever before. So why don't we, that's what I wanted to find out and really talk about this with you guys. So I just want to go over sort of like what firms are doing. And the big question is, what is big data? Believe it or not, that definition hasn't been well circulated in our understanding of what big data is. And I want to talk about that. The new types of data that are hitting our supply chain that we want to capture. I want to talk about a little bit of that. And then, because I'm retail, I'm from Verizon Wireless, I'm going to focus a little bit on what retail is doing inside big data and some of the current tools. And then Prarthana in particular, I'm happy that Prarthana came. She was Verizon Wireless's poster child. I mean, because of her background, she's from Wipro in the IT world, and then went to Rutgers to get her supply chain MBA. So she comes with this IT-centric background with an interest in supply chain. And so when I was looking around for people who have that kind of background, she was at several case competitions, and I met her at the case competition, and I saw her potential. So she had both the interest, and then she had sort of like this computer science part of her that I knew that I wanted to really harness. So now, really, Prarthana is in the group. And then what she did was, she did some visualization and analytics around big data within Verizon. And she'll talk about how to visualize big data. And so my basic message, Jay Nirenberg last month talked about change management. But I'm here to talk about change in some ways, and that's one of the takeaways. This thing called big data is about to change supply chain because of the types of data that we're going to have access to and the ability to mine that information. So this was a recent call on November 19th of 2014. They basically asked corporations, where are you going to use big data? And it turns out only 16% of them said it's going to be in the supply chain. The next question was, where are you going to use it in the next 3 to 5 years? And the answer was 41%. So like I said, it's in its infancy. Very few people know about big data in the supply chain. They see the potential of where it's going to go. So nearly half of them are going to start moving in this direction. So it's a phenomenon that's about to happen. But this interesting thing was, right now, if I just look at supply chain and the knowledge of big data in the supply chain, only 1 out of 2 supply chain professionals know about big data. Only 1 out of 2. They don't understand it. It's something that they haven't grasped yet. That's why it's still in its infancy. And then when they asked, of those people, only 8% are extremely familiar with big data and supply chain. So it's something that I think a lot of supply chain people haven't sort of come to grips with yet. And so I think part of the reason of why I felt like it was important to talk about big data in the supply chain is really get the understanding of what big data is, what the potential of big data is inside the supply chain. I guess I was thinking about one thing was what is the definition? So what is the definition of big data? So when I went out to, I have this friend, he works for the US government. And he always comes to me and says, Ben, I'm from the government. I'm here to help. So I turned to NSF and NIH. Those two groups are very, if you ever wrote a grant for NSF or NIH or for the federal government, they're very unique in the sense that sometimes they create a word. I remember I was proposing on cyber infrastructure for the US government. They actually don't know what cyber infrastructure is. They're hoping that the people who bid on it will help define it. So that's what happens. Big data. They don't actually know what big data is, although they probably, US government has been doing big data for a long time. So look at what they say. It refers to a large, diverse, complex, longitudinal, and/or distributed data set generated from instruments, sensors, internet transactions, email, video, clip streams, and all other data digital sources available. Basically, it's everything, including like the kitchen sink. It's everything. So that was one of the first definitions of big data out there. The one I kind of gravitated towards is in Gartner. Gartner in 2012 said big data is high volume, high velocity, or a high variety of information, assets that require new forms of processing to enable enhanced decision making and insight. That's the one I sort of use. But the question is, look at biology, look at astrophysics or physics. They've been doing big data for years. Their data sets are terabytes long. So, and then if you look at the industries like telecommunications, we're always dealing with 100 million customers. So, and we've been doing that for years. Government has always been using huge sets of data because the population size is so large. So why is it big data so important now? And one person pointed out to me in social sciences, big data is amassing a huge amounts of statistical information on social and economic trends and human behavior. The reason why I think it's really caught people's attention is because the methods that we're using can get at data in a better way than we've ever had before. So to me, the issue is not size or volume. We've always had big data sets. It's the granularity. We're able to see more inside the data, and people are worried. They're concerned about their own privacy. I've never seen privacy discussed so often when we're discussing big data. So that's why I think it's the concern is out there. We've always had big data. That's why big data is being talked about much more often than we've ever had before. But it's also because the technology has advanced much faster than we've had ever before. So let's look at the types of data that we have in big data. I start by the stuff that we tend to look at that we've known for years, which is replenishment. Inside supply chain, we have point of sale, the stuff that you have inside your, basically your stores. But then now we have this new kind of a new set, so we can see what you're doing on your iPads, sort of like what you're reading, how far you've read. We can look at conversational data. We can look at all your Twitter feeds. text messages, Facebook. You know, these are huge sets of data, and we're able to start to mine this kind of stuff. We're starting to be able to do video. We can actually search on video now and see what's going on. Of course, we have YouTube. We have huge, you know, I don't know how many people use Flickr. We have tons of Flickr photos from everywhere in the world. And last year I talked about, you know, who has Fitbit. I remember, Jay, you had a Fitbit. We can now, yeah, we can now see how, you know, your heartbeat, how many steps you're taking. And the future, to me, is the Internet of Things. For example, we were hearing about manless vehicles and all the data that's coming out of cars. Smart grids, home automation.
Even the drones.
Yeah, even drones. Of course, our cell phones have all this location data that we can mine, and that's all that's coming into the network. And we're starting to be able to take a look at that and be able to mine it and see what we can learn. We can learn what we like to do and what we want to, you know, what we purchase, where we go. It's all that data is available. So I started looking at how are supply chain companies using big data. And like I said, this is only at the infancy. This is how we are thinking about using big data. So in inventory and operations planning, definitely about what's causing store growth. So it's about customer profiling. Basically, what kind of customers are coming to the stores? We can identify their demographic. Scheduling store labor. So now that we know when, we can see almost minute by minute of who goes to a store, and then we can see the profile of the customers of when they are coming into the store, so we can schedule our labor closer, saying, okay, around lunchtime, I see there's this group that always comes, a large number of customers come, so then I want to keep my labor at that place, the peak. Optimize assortments. If you get Partha on the side, she's actually helping me work on optimized assortments. So, you know, what products should be where in the country? I don't have to just flood everywhere with every single product across the country. But certain places might buy certain things different than other places. I was talking to a lady from Bloomingdale's before. She is part of product assortment. And did you know that Bloomingdale said only 20% of their products are actually common? So all their stores have different things in it. 80% of their clothing is different in every single store. So how do you make that decision? You'll look at customer retention, when to do price and promotions, and I want to actually get to where Partha shows you some of the graphs that are used when you're looking at big data, because it is different. So if you're going to launch on a big data exercise, this was basically a poll saying, where do you see the big benefit? So most people see the big benefit on product traceability. So now I know you can follow products, at least for us, it's like cell phones, I can follow cell phones. But if I use other technologies, so by RFID, other technologies, I can now track products through its life cycle, through its evolution. Of course, it increases supply chain visibility. We've always been after supply chain visibility. The ability to geolocate, do mapping of where products are, what our demographics is there. Like I mentioned, Internet of Things. This whole idea of structured and unstructured data. So we're all used to using data warehouses where we have rows and columns. Unstructured data are like sensor data. it doesn't have a row or a column. So how do I mine sensor data? Or how do I mine Twitter feeds and social media? These are new. These are new areas. So different data warehousing structures are being set up for this unstructured data. You'll hear of these things called non-SQL, NoSQL kinds of things. This is a new set of data types that we're able to mine now. And then, Verizon does this, and a lot of companies do this. They look at Twitter and basically try to determine the sentiment of the Twitter feed. Do they feel great about Verizon? Do they feel bad about AT&T? I mean, how do you get that from a Twitter feed, which is basically 140 characters long, and you determine the sentiment? There's been a case study about temperature-controlled vehicles. There's a lot of products that are sent in temperature-controlled vehicles. It turns out that sometimes they'll say on average the temperature was -20. But it turns out inside that vehicle, the temperature actually changes. There's a variation. And sometimes that variation, if it goes too low or it gets too warm, can destroy the product. So what they want to do is actually look at the sort of like a minute by minute or every 5 minutes, what the temperature is in that truck. That makes a big difference, whether that product survives or doesn't survive.
Well, and that's being used in chain custody disputes. So if I've got cold chain storage, if I've got farm storage that I'm transporting, I can go back step by step and say, okay, so it wasn't the carrier, maybe it was the retail location, maybe the refrigeration was off in the store.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing.
But you've got to meet, for that's FDA compliance.
Right. But it's that kind of, basically, it's the sensors that are placed inside that truck. Now we have visibility to that, and then we were recording that and capturing that. And within, I know people like the telecommunications company, we're capturing millions and millions of tweets per second. And that's an incredible amount. So how are you going to mine that? When you have millions and millions of feeds per second.
Are there any social experiments where you put something out and then you wait for a reaction from on social media? Do any of that? Experiment with the social media? See what people's reactions are?
You get that when you run promotions for a company. That is when you closely monitor the social media to see what the reaction is. Are they taking the promotions well or not? For example, Verizon came with, what was the plan before More Everything? There was another plan.
Yeah, right, I don't remember.
So they changed it to More Everything because the customers were not as adaptive to that particular plan. So they changed the name to More Everything and changed some of the parameters around it. So yes, there is. It's not typically experiment because companies don't like experimenting with customers, but they try gauging every time they come with new promotions to see if it is working or not.
Right, so it's again a sentiment. Right. You launch something and you see the reaction in your Twitter feeds to see if that actually took and the customer actually saw it and are reacting to it.
And Jim, in the old days, we used to see that on TV through the networks and through cable. But now, with more advertising dollars from major companies being sent, this way, where it can be targeted, and there's a switching dynamic going on. If you can do that, that's where a lot of the investment is going, versus primetime television or where money used to be spent in newspapers. Now it's really targeted. It can be targeted to the geography, to the user of a specific phone.
Social media, they have all these things where you can determine, whether you're Marilyn Monroe or what your favorite color is. So they're profiling you slowly so they can target you based upon your likes and dislikes. Every time you take one of those surveys, they got their profiling.
Who's Marilyn Monroe?
You like it opt in, or you can opt
I
out.
could be Cary Grant.
But it is interesting when you take like a map and you take to take Twitter feeds and basically put it on a map. It's really interesting to see where, let's say you do a promotion in the Northeast and see if that makes a difference to the Northeast, or you do something in the South or something like that, and you can see what is there a reaction to anything changing in your Twitter feeds.
It was, I think, share everything to more everything for Verizon that we changed. And the reason was share everything was not as successful as we thought it would be. So the reaction from Verizon was make it better, rename it, and now it's doing much better. So,
Yeah.
And is sentiment on Twitter statistically valid?
I would say yes, with a caveat. What is the expression?
Is it fuzzy?
Yeah, I mean, you can get it sort of, because the only thing is, I forget the word, but you can be sarcastic.
yeah.
That is so great,
Yeah.
All you see is great. He is so bad, or something like that. So you're going to get that. So those are always going to throw you off. And probably that is the hardest thing. You only have 140 characters to interpret sentiment. But I think, let's say, I think the thing is like 20% of your Twitter feeds are going to be sarcastic. So you basically say, okay, there's 20% in there that's going to be like error. But for the most part, you can try to pick off sentiment. Sentiment is probably one of the, like the biggest research areas. How are you going to pick up sarcastic comments?
Well, I guess part of the question was, do enough people, when you do a promotion, do enough people get on Twitter to express their view?
Right, but you're looking
Buy
at,
something, do I get on Twitter and say, gee, I just got this new piece of sporting equipment, it's wonderful.
right.
Depends who you are. I mean, there are people who.
The question is it selection bias? Are there enough people doing it to say, this is what I send?
Yeah.
But
That's actually.
So, in addition to Twitter, what we even mine is the calls that go to the call center. If there's a remark typed in, we also look into the Net Promoter Survey scores that we do internally. So a company doesn't look at just one website and say, oh, this is a great campaign or this is really terrible. There are 4 or 5 different places from where you get that data, and you put it together to make it more statistically viable. Because you would raise your concern somewhere. If it's not on Twitter, it might be on Facebook, it might be on another website which has technology-related comments. So every company goes to 3, 4, 5 different sources to get that information. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So when I was in demand planning, when there were recalls from a competitor, it hadn't been, our competitor was Johnson & Johnson, it was recall of cold medications for kids. And when I was in demand planning, I started to look at the reaction of the mothers, and they were so upset that this could be dangerous to their child. I saw such sentiment that for those of us in planning, I called a special meeting and I said, we've got upside here that's much larger than we expect. I mean, I jumped right on it from a demand planning standpoint because I said, I don't think J&J realizes how angry the mothers are about recall and the impact of it. And so just from a supply chain point of view, you really do have to. I just read them and I just saw the number of them, and it just this was like 4 years ago. I just hopped right on it, and it was just so compelling. And I said they don't even understand what they're looking at here. How this will take years to make up in terms of how angry the consumers were. And it did. It took them a long time.
Right.
I didn't follow the credit.
Yeah.
Take care of the patients and mothers.
I mean, I think even when you do the sentiment analysis, I mean, you do, I mean, you just can't avoid just reading the thing, just to verify it's actually correct. So you go back to the manual method of just reading.
What's that doing? Would you track those who make comments, see if they're haters?
Yeah, you would basically go back into it. So I mean, a lot of the statistical software who do like, look at text data essentially, they categorize them. So they're putting it in different categories. So then you're not reading millions of text, you're reading maybe a couple hundred. And you then go through it and you just try to verify that it's actually saying what it's supposed to say. So it's trying to pick up if there is like if there's a negative sentiment out there, is it really negative, so you start reading through it. And then the people who are analyzing it will have a much better idea what's really happening with the customer. I just wanted to talk a little bit, I don't want to get too technical, but between what's currently available and what's sort of evolving and why I think that things are changing. So like I said, our data tends to be very structured. It's rows and columns. And now we have a new set of data called unstructured. They have semi-structured, because even like Twitter feeds, you can identify where that Twitter feed came from, who it came from. You have an idea of that demographic. So those are rows and columns. Maybe the feed itself is some text field, but and then you can also see like cell phone or Fitbit data. Those are things that are not something that I could put necessarily in a row or column. But so new structures of technology are trying to address this unstructured thing. We tend to be rules-based. I mean, we do like if-then. If this happens, then do this. If this happens, do that. So the whole principle, we're starting to go into machine learning and using multiple ifs. So it will change and adapt based on what it sees in the marketplace. So these are things that we're getting through machine learning. I know I have my team working on optimization of inventory throughout the supply chain. That's only one optimization. But when I started looking at, let's say I want to optimize, I was looking at actually IBM's ability to optimize plants. They have 95 plants making all different things from semiconductors to computer systems. And they want to optimize the entire network. You're looking at multiple optimizations. You're looking at transportation optimization. Each factory probably has to be optimized. Their suppliers have to be optimized in terms of what they deliver. So you're looking at what they call concurrent optimization, multiple optimizations at one time. So those are things that are, when we get so much data, this is the future. If we want to really manage our supply chain really well. We tend to focus, I feel like in the supply chain, we focus inward. We look inside and say, okay, I want to make this particular process. This is a chart of all the technologies. A lot of them are some of the things I'm sure a lot of you have seen before. SAS, SPS, these are visualization analytical tools. They've been around for years. Cognos has been around. But the new ones, so Partha used Aster. ClickView is new. Tableau is newer. These are all visualization, data warehousing. These are all some of the newer players, and some of them, of course, the Microsoft and Informatica are the older players. But this whole area here, I'm sure many of you have heard of Hadoop or Hive, Hortonworks. These are the new players, and they're popping up like crazy. They're really out there trying to innovate, and these are newer players who are all working on big data analytics. But they should be more and more familiar over the years. I'm just curious, how many companies do you recognize? Do you know amongst this group who are working on big data in your company? Do you know if there are? Okay.
How about you set those programs like ClickView mentioned? et cetera, but the extent of using big data.
Right. But I've seen a lot of companies migrate to Hadoop. It's cheaper storage, and you can take tremendous amounts of volume. That's where you would probably pull in all your Twitter feeds, your Facebook, into that structure, and then use like Aster or some other way to mine that information. And then you would visualize it inside Informatica or other like Tableau. Oh, too small to see, but you'll see, everybody turns to Gartner when they want to find the best piece of software. And I can tell you, like, the ones that are sort of on top are the Tableau, ClickView, Microsoft is in the space, IBM, SAS, they're all in that space. But a lot of times, everybody gauges themselves off of Gartner's recommendations. Everybody seems to talk about it.